Closed captioning sponsored by Enron Corp, becoming the world's first natural gas major. You're watching Big 2, KMID-TV, Midland, Odessa. Now, the team that brings you big news first. This is Big 2, News at 6.
A small plane crashes into a residential area in Midland. 2 people are killed. The aircraft was taking off from Midland Air Park. The plane went down about 1 mile from the airport. Both victims, who have not been identified, were aboard the plane. Tonight, authorities search for answers. Good evening, everyone. I'm Terry Graham. Topping our news tonight, a small plane crashes on takeoff near Midland Air Park, killing 2 people. Now, here's what we do know at this hour. 2 people dead are the pilot and a passenger. Their names have not been released. The plane went down about 1 mile from the airport. The crash occurred near Loop 250 and Garfield. The FAA's Lubbock Flight Center and the National Transportation Safety Board have launched a full investigation to determine the exact cause of today's crash. And there are still a number of questions surrounding the crash that remain unanswered. And of course, we're bringing you the latest information as it is given to us. Big 2's Christy Bullard now joins us. And Christy, you were out at the crash site today. Any new developments that you can make us aware of?
Well, Terry, like you said, the airplane did take off from Midland Air Park, and it crashed about a mile after takeoff right into a neighborhood right off behind Office Depot on Loop 250. We still don't know exactly what caused the plane to malfunction. However, we did catch up with one young man who watched the disaster unravel with his very own eyes. Jeff Good says he and his friend watched the single-engine airplane take a nosedive from the air.
It went in right smack dab in the middle of the house, and just the whole roof and everything, it just caught on fire.
It was around 1:30 this afternoon when the aircraft rammed into a residence at 2507 Bell Chase.
So we went to go try to get them, but then the flames just came up, you know, and we couldn't get near them.
There were 2 people on board the plane. Both are dead, and the names haven't yet been released. Fortunately, there was no one in the house at the time of the crash. Charles Oxford and his wife were at work, and his 2 children were at school. Oxford's parents saw a report of the accident on television and knew at once it was their son's home.
Well, about that time the phone rang, it was our son. He said, "Mother, the airplane hit right in the back of my house."
And had her groomed.
And I said, "That's just what your daddy said."
It's not yet known exactly how much damage is done to the house, but it did take a number of firefighters to extinguish the flames.
I just talked to the homeowner. He doesn't know because he hadn't seen, but he seems to think that portion that was damaged is going to be like the master bedroom and den area.
Oxford refused to comment on camera, but he did tell us he has insurance to cover the accident. While the homeowner seems to be taking this disaster in stride, some of his neighbors aren't quite so calm.
I live in this hellhole for 1.5 years. And I think the way people are treated around here that have an ounce of a brain is despicable.
While Sergeant Garcia was talking to the media today, Madeline Donovan exploded, claiming this could have been avoided if only Midland officials would have done something earlier.
And I've complained, about the low-flying aircraft once at least 8 times.
Now, Donovan also claims that Midland officials told her effective December 1994 that there would be no more aircraft flying so low over the neighborhood, and we have received calls from other disgruntled employees who said the same thing, so we will address this issue tomorrow. And one last note, as we mentioned earlier, the accident is still under investigation.
Okay, Christy, we know for sure that 2 people were killed in today's crash. Is there a chance that there could be any other fatalities?
No, we do not have any confirmed reports, but while we were out there at the site, we had neighbors coming up to us saying, "We have relatives and we can't find them and we don't know where they are and we've been searching," but we will definitely keep you updated and have a complete report tonight at 10.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that report, Christy. Well, Big 2's Bill Warren is covering the crash from the site. He now joins us live with this report. Bill?
Terry, there were a number of agencies and a number of officers with those agencies out here helping put together the pieces of what happened this afternoon. With me is one of them, Sergeant Chris Mashburn with the Department of Public Safety. You interviewed people who saw the takeoff, who saw the plane come into the area, saw and heard the plane go down. What are you piecing together happened from the witness reports you were told?
The witnesses that we're talking to are advising that the plane was awful labored when it took off. The plane was heavy. It was loaded, completely loaded, had 2 grown adults in it. also a full fuel tank, therefore causing the plane to labor at takeoff. It did stay on the runway an extremely long time before it took off, and once in the air, it continued to be labored. It never gained altitude that it should have, and just eventually took a nosedive and diving down into the residence.
Was the engine running the entire time? Was the engine running at the time the plane hit the ground?
From the witnesses that we've spoke with, they said yes, that the engine was running. And as a matter of fact, it was running. It sounded like to them full blast.
Okay. You have now begun, all the agencies involved have begun the identification process. You've learned a couple of things so far that indicate it's probably going to be a while before we know. What have you learned?
Well, what we've learned at this time that the subjects were, in fact, en route from Houston to Alaska, that they were in transit. We talked to the person who owned the plane last, and he said that he had recently sold the plane. Therefore, we're backtracking at this time, trying to make some identification.
Was he able to tell you who he had sold the plane to, do you know?
No, he was not real clear on that point.
Okay. There was one other point about, you were able to recover the identification number from the airplane.
Yes, we did have the tail number, and that's how we went ahead and checked for the registration to find the most recent owner that we knew of.
Someone might be saying, well, they bought gas, didn't they charge it?
Well, they actually paid for the last 2 gas purchases with cash. Therefore, we couldn't backtrack and use a credit card for identification.
Sergeant Mashburn, thank you very much. Indications are that it may be a while before we know for certain who was in the airplane. The DPS and the Midland Police Department have been coordinating. They have decided that the Midland Police Department will release the identification of the victims when it is known. But apparently at this point, they are not local people, and at the site this evening, there's no indication that anyone else is missing or may have been injured in the crash. There were no people in the house. There was a dog in the house. The dog got out safely. Terry?
Okay, Bill, have you had an opportunity to talk to the owner of the home that caught fire today in association with the crash?
I have talked to the owner, and I've talked to several of the neighbors around him who are helping him get temporary facilities set up somewhere and put the pieces of his life together. And I'll have more that I can tell you about that later in the newscast.
Okay, thanks a lot. Big 2's Bill Rowan reporting live from the scene of today's crash. Well, besides the fiery plane crash today, there is other news to report tonight. When we come back, an Ector County attorney is in jeopardy of losing his job. We'll have details after this short break.